Welcome to Connect Church Online. We're glad to have you with us. My name is Dwayne Hawksworth, and I'm the lead pastor here at Connecting Waco. Today, we're in week 2 of a brand new message series called Winning the War in Your Mind. Now, I love to share this series because the truths we're talking about have had such a powerful and positive impact in my life. I hope and pray they'll do the same thing for you in your life. The thoughts we think are powerful. They change our perspective, impact our decisions, determine how we feel, and influence our habits. And sometimes we become trapped by our thoughts, unable to escape negative and unhealthy thinking. And in this series, we're learning what it means to take our thoughts captive and win the war in our minds. To help us make the most of this series, you'll find a downloadable file on our website and our Facebook page called a mood log. This is a free download created by Dr. David Burns, and it can help you put into motion the things we're discussing over the next 3 weeks. I'd also like to recommend a book written by Craig Rochelle. It's called, just like the title of our series, Winning the War in Your Mind. Much of the content we're discussing comes from this book, but reading it will take you deeper and give you a fuller understanding than we'll be able to do in the time we have in these messages. You can pick up the book from most all book retailers. Now, before we get started today, first let me tell you how you can connect with us and keep up with the events here at Connect Church in Waco. I'd also like to let you know how you can give and support what we're doing if you'd like. Take your cell phone and text the words Connect Church to 94,000. That's the words Connect Church to 94,000. This will provide you with a link to both connect with us and to give if you'd like. You can also go to our website, connectwaco.com/give. To connect with us by mail, our mailing address is Connect Church, P.O. Box 4317, Waco, Texas 76715. There'll be a screen at the end of our time together with all of this information too. Thank you for watching today, for connecting with us, and for supporting what we're doing here at Connect Church in Waco. Our band has a song for you today. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this week's online celebration.
Sing with me. Is the lamp unto my feet. Your word is the only word for me. It's a narrow road that leads to life, and I want to be on it. It's a narrow road and the leads to life, and I want to be on it. You at your word. If you said it, I believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you started, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. You spoke, and the chaos fell in.
We're in week 2 of our Winning the War in Your Mind series, and this week's message title is Taking Your Mind Back. I used to think that the way you think is just the way you think. But my journey through a traumatic brain injury and the resulting depression, anxiety, and panic attacks taught me differently. We're conditioned through life, the things we're taught and the things we caught from the people around us, to think certain ways. Of course, we seldom question any of those things. They just are the way things are. The truth is, quite often, the things were taught and the things we caught are not the right things to think or the best ways to think. It takes some work, some effort, but it's worth the effort to take our mind back. When I was 12, I got my first job cleaning tables and filling vending machines in a coffee shop. I made $10 a week. And for 2 years, I saved my money, and when I turned 14, I bought my first car for $425. I wasn't able to drive it yet. I didn't have a license yet. It wasn't much, but I began fixing it up and kept it started to keep the battery and fluids up and running. And one day, though, I went out to start my car and the battery was dead, so I went to jump it off. Well, I still had a lot to learn about cars. I accidentally crossed the positive and negative cables on my car, and instantly the alternator of the car went up in smoke. That was an expensive lesson for a 14-year-old making $10 a week to learn. It was a mistake I never repeated. Things in our lives go up in smoke too, and the reason is because in our minds we often have the wires crossed. For most all of us, in one way or another, we have our wires crossed in our thought life. Again, if you're with us last week, we talked about the neural pathways that take place in our brain. In other words, every time you think a thought, you're creating a new pattern of thought or a new pathway, almost like a mental trail in your mind. Your experiences or your thoughts are wiring or programming your brain. And here's what happens. When we think a thought, our brain is creating new neural pathways. The more we think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought again, and the more dominant that thought becomes. Now, this is really good news when we're thinking on truth, but it's incredibly bad news when so many of us are believing the lies. Why do things in our lives go up in smoke? Many times it's because we have the wires in our minds crossed. And this process begins when we're very young. For example, if a little baby smiles and the mom smiles back and talks some baby talk, the baby's brain creates a little pathway that says, smiling is good. If a baby touches something hot, a hot stove, and the body feels pain, the baby's brain creates a pathway that says, hot stove is bad. If the baby wants some candy and says, I want some candy, but mom says, no candy, the baby starts to cry. Mom gives the baby candy. Now the baby's brain says, crying gets me candy. Again, the more we think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought again. Why do our emotions go up in smoke? Many times it's because we have the wires in our minds crossed. So, how do we uncross them? In this series, we're following the journey the Apostle Paul took in renewing his mind. Let's look at a powerful statement he wrote in the New Testament letter of Romans chapter 12 and verse 2. Here's what he wrote. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The world around us has a pattern of thinking about how to live life and what's important and how to think and how to live. The world's pattern of thinking is often completely contrary to the way Jesus lived and wants us to live. Paul's answer is that our thinking be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This renewing of our mind means creating new pathways of thinking in our mind. The next word is important. The word then tells us that this transformation of our thoughts is what will enable us to live according to God's will for our lives. Renewing is our enabling to test and approve what God's will is. Renewing is our enabling to test his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Jesus doesn't want us to live defeated, discouraged, and depressed. God's will is far less about when and where and far more about the who and how. God's will is far less about when and where we're to do something and far more about who we are to be and how we are to act and treat others. Here's another important statement, and don't miss this. You cannot live a positive life when you have a negative mind. Let me say that again. Don't miss this. You cannot live a positive life when you have a negative mind. You can't live a positive life when the wires are crossed. If you don't control what you think, you'll never be able to control what you do. Let me say that again. If you don't control what you think, you will never be able to control how you feel. Listen to what Paul wrote about this to the followers of Jesus in the city of Philippi. We can read it today in the New Testament letter we know as Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Fix your thoughts. Fixing our thoughts on the right things means fixing them away from the wrong things. Fixing our thoughts means fixing our thoughts on what is true. Fixing our thoughts means fixing our thoughts on what's honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Fixing our thoughts means fixing our thoughts on what's helpful. How do we do that? We read Scripture to see what God has to say about us, about life, and about how we're to live our lives, how we're to treat others. We learn the truth about ourselves, about life, and about our relationship with God. Then we on purpose compare what we're thinking with what is true and right. Then we replace what we're thinking with the thoughts of what are true and right. There are 10 basic things we do to the truth to distort it and make what we believe into a lie. All or nothing thinking, viewing things only as absolutes. Overgeneralization, viewing a negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Have you ever said, this always happens? Mental filter, dwelling on the negatives and ignoring the positives. Discounting the positive, insisting your positive qualities don't count. Jumping to conclusions. You jump to conclusions that aren't warranted by the facts. Magnification or minimization. In other words, blowing things out of proportion or shrinking them. Emotional reasoning. You reason from your feelings. I feel like an idiot, so I must be an idiot. Should statements. This is the old shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Labeling. Instead of saying you made a mistake, you say I'm a jerk or I'm just a loser. Blame. You find fault instead of solving the problem. You blame yourself, you blame others, but you place blame over solving the problem. Learning to identify these distortions is a key part of disciplining our thought life. This is where using the mood log is so helpful. Using these tools with our thoughts, we compare with what's true and we replace the wrong thought with the right one. When we purpose to do this over time, we create new paths of thinking in our minds that conform to the way of Jesus. When we create these new paths of thinking that agree with the way Jesus thinks, we see the direction of our lives change. We see the way we feel about ourselves and our lives change with them. We have our minds, our thinking renewed. We learn to think right ways, true ways, and our lives begin to change. What happens? We win the war in our mind.